Honey Badger don't care. Hello everyone, it is Mike Levin on Thursday, March 11th, 2021. And when last we left off, well, in the whole video series leading up to where we left off, we made Windows 10 usable by stripping out all that UI noise to have a real nice environment for just showing what we want. And we showed how to use virtual desktops with your muscle memory and using the method of loci so that the first three screens have special meaning, journal, Jupyter, labs, so that no matter what else is in front, you can control one and get back to that. A lot of fixed location concepts. And how to install Jupyter Notebooks in Windows and to always have it running. Run your web browser by running Jupyter Notebook or Labs. And how to install Ubuntu Linux on Windows, always a popular video, including a graphics subsystem for the Linux side. How to install Microsoft Terminal, what you see me using now, together with controlling your drop-down menus so you can have whatever you need here, such as an Anaconda PowerShell. I showed you how to get onto GitHub and to eliminate usernames and passwords whenever you git push, which is one of the biggest pains of using a Git or GitHub, really. And then I showed replacing the requests, the ever-popular requests package, HTTP for humans, with HTTPX that supports async I/O natively, and that is for concurrency. I also covered how that is different and how to get true parallelism when you want it. I showed how to get a high-speed persistent local dictionary so you can do NoSQL-like stuff using nothing more than the standard Python dictionary data type, which is key-value pairs, and back-ending it with SQLite 3. And since we were using SQLite 3 and creating databases with it, I showed you how to interact with it with regular SQL in the row and column traditional SQL API. We installed NBDev together and made Jupyter a better development environment, which claims to let you make packages ready for release to the Python packaging index, Pip Install. So we used Jupyter and NBDev to create a command line utility. We made that command line utility support arguments, and that's pretty much where we left off. When you run it in Jupyter mode, it uses pickles to get the arguments that were last used when you ran this from the command line. So in other words, now here's our scaffolding for almost every project up to this point. We're about to add another piece, but in almost every project, I expect to run it as a command line with different arguments. And how would you do that? Well, we'll go to that screen 3 where your current work is. It oftentimes becomes a terminal for me, which it is in this case. We cd into, I believe it was SEO, SEOML. No, it's in GitHub first, as it always is. And in there, we have another directory with the exact same name. This is a convention, not for NBDev, but for the Python packaging index. They're just going with it. So we have in here core.py, which we can just run Python core.py. And it tells you got to put in some arguments. So Python core.py, there needs to be a -f for file and a -d for the description. And now we just ran it, and you can see it got as its input description and my file. So we go back over here and see how it says a big scheduled job and site name. That was from the last time I ran it. Well, top to bottom run, key bound to Control-Shift-E. I recommend you do something similar. I run it top to bottom, and the arguments that are showing now are replaced by the description and my file, which is the last one I used over here. So that brings us up to where we are And the reason for doing such commands is, of course, to collect some data. So now is time to collect some data. But before I can tell you that story, I have to tell you this story. Most people at this time turn to the vast amounts of public data that's out there. I'm not going to. I am going to connect to Google services such as Search Console and Analytics, which I presume is the kind of thing most people out there who are using this in the course of work and not, billing themselves as data scientists or data engineers, but are just trying to do their work, are using it more like me. You got to connect to some services. You got to pull some data. You got to process that data, make some reports, send it to people, whatever. And all that is usually best accomplished through Google services these days. I mean, there's other ways, but if your company went the G Suite direction, or you don't have to abide by particularly the tech of your company or your environment, it's nice to do your own automation your way. And the way I've often come to do it is automating against Google services. So I like to do that in Jupyter Lab these days. I've done it much over the years, and I have a history of this. In fact, that's what these tabs are for. This is to show you about a month ago when I started thinking about what I was going to be doing with my YouTube presence. And then this is the spate of videos where whenever I was doing something noteworthy, which there was a lot of as I was settling into my new machine went. This is a search for my name with OAuth2. You'll see it goes back to 6 years ago. And I've been dealing with these issues of getting into Google services to do my thing for quite a long time. And this is the latest rendition, and it is very much inspired by this Daniel Michaels in Australia blog. And it's an object-oriented style that is clear to me. Everything is contained in one class. The function of the dunder init is very clear. It sets some local things, and then it runs itself. Oh, wait, there's an entry point. There's a self.run. Well, there certainly is. Down here is run. And so you create an instance of the class. You call its run method, but why dunder init doesn't just handle that is I'm still figuring out some nuances. And then you show what came back when you called the run function. So that was very inspiring to me. And I used that to create this package in PyPi. I did a Python packaging index release in preparation for this video right here. This is sort of like the build up to a magic trick. So all this documentation I did as a notebook in Jupyter Lab. And then I turned it into the documentation with NBDev. And I did the pushing up to the Python packaging index the new but normal way. I have not used NBDev to do the actual upload to PyPi, and that's in my future, but it's here and it's ready to go for this video. And if you watch the previous video, you will see me testing this out. So really the next step to do, and I'm going to do this on a brand new screen, Control-Alt-T for a new terminal. And then we CD to my Linux home. You got your Windows home, which is sort of here. And then you got your Linux home, where you see the tilde at the front. And I don't have a lot in there except for a few virtual environments and from the last time I ran this thing. So I'm going to remove credentials.pickle. We're going to essentially create that again. And I'm going to remove those two PyPi directories because I'm going to make a third one. I just don't want to look at that other stuff. And this is deleting virtual environments. There might be some more appropriate way to do it, but I have been learning that when you want to test out a package and isolate it, it's really easy now under Python 3. I made a mistake by showing getting virtual env, but this beginning, make sure you're running whatever Python you're in here, except I don't really even want, or it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can do it from inside another. So this sort of prompt tells you you're already inside a virtual environment, a Python virtual environment. And you see that a lot of places. You see that in the base for the Anaconda prompt. Everyone uses the same trick. And now with Python 3, that 3 there, you can pretty much know you can use the command venv. So you're making a virtual environment, and we'll just call it test. Okay. So plop, it drops onto the hard drive. We now have a test directory. We can now source test bin activate. A little bit of magic incantation you need to know. You just need to know. You learn it, get it into your muscle memory, right? Now we're in a different venv. We're in a different Python virtual environment called test. We just activated it. And now we can pip install OAuth. That's my package. That's what I just pip released. And it's going to install a couple of other credentials that are required. Because it's for doing Google Authentication, it needs the API client libraries, and it needs the OAuth, the Google OAuth client library. So that got installed just as a requirement of my OAuth package. But now it's on this virtual environment, and we can test it by just firing up Python. And I'll show you it first here, and then I'll show you it over here in Jupyter Lab, right at the bottom here, because it's the next thing. Because a command like this that we're mocking up is really to hit against some data source, pull some data, store it using that key value pair of the NoSQL approach that I was talking about, and to do some further transforms after that to turn it into row and column data. So we just ran Python from the virtual environment that we, pip installed OAuth into, so we can import OAuth, right? So we imported OAuth. We've got the object there. Now we can say arbitrary variable name. I'm going to use the word credentials for convention. We use our package name. And having done object-oriented programming now, I'm a bit more sympathetic to using camel case followed by snake case. So, this is the API for OAuth. You got to type some variable name like credentials equals ohawf.Credentials, open close parenthesis, .get, open close parenthesis, hit enter, and you get this authentication URL. Please visit this URL to authorize this application. Now, I have not been verified by Google, so bear with me. You'll have to do the same thing. Control-click to follow the link. I shall do that. Where is my browser? Opened it over there. I'm going to choose my Mike 11 SEO account. Oh, verification. Good thing I have my phone sitting nearby. Everything is much, much tighter now in terms of security, because as it becomes easier to do development work, they're giving you loaded guns, and Google's trying to keep you from shooting yourself in the foot. So I just submitted this app to Google for verification, and it's got a desktop app credential. So you hit advanced and you hit this. So who knows, you may have to do the same thing for a while, okay? And then you hit allow. Now, after you hit allow, you get this other token. You can copy it like this with Control-C, or you can just click that, which will auto-copy it. It put it in its own browser window, so you can just close out of that and paste it here. And now it looks like it just comes back to a prompt. It looks like nothing happened. Well, you remember that credentials, a variable name we used up here. It is a credentials object. It's a Google OAuth credentials object. And we could look inside of there. You can see the different things that are in there. So, you can check if it's valid, you can refresh it, you can do different things with it here, except the package really does most of that for you. So this is all kind of big and ugly now. So I'm going to exit out of Python as a way of clearing. Okay, and I'll just run Python again. But now when I import OAuth, and I do that thing again, it's always good to practice, right? Credentials equals OAuth.Credentials open close dot get open close. So we have our credentials object and we were not challenged. That is because it's stored in the background now, always using the refresh token to re-authenticate. It's like having a service account without having a service account. There's a long story here, except there's different types of authentication even under OAuth. The type I showed you is three-legged authentication, which is in common between desktop apps and some web servers, where they're not going to have access to your data, but the app needs to be allowed to have access to your data. So you're sitting on your local desktop, you're running Jupyter Notebook or Labs. Your instance of Jupyter Notebooks or Labs has access to your Google data. So that's how this works. And you can use it with different services. The first thing you do is you look at the examples on my either PyPi page or the GitHub page. This is also in GitHub now, so we should be able to go GitHub. And I believe my name is sufficiently unique that you should be able to OAuth. And there it is. So you can find the code. You can git clone it, or you can pip install it. I actually recommend git cloning it because you're going to want to do some stuff to the code. You can find this same documentation in either place. Again, generated by NBDev, this documentation. So no matter what Google service you want to connect to, you need something called the build function from out of API client discovery. This is actually Google's API clients. And we shall do that. We shall do that here in Python. In I guess they call this the interactive console I'm using. There's so many contexts to run Python. It's one of the really powerful things about it. This guy in the middle confuses me, so I'll close out of it. And in fact, I'll just move this window a bit closer. You can move things between windows. Surprise! And so our examples, right? We just did that one. Now we'll build a service that connects to Google Search Console. Right. So arbitrary variable name, GSC_service, equals the build that we just imported, a API name, in this case webmasters, the API version number you want, and then parameter name equals our value that we have from right here. Now this often confuses noobs when they look at this. Something equals itself, that doesn't seem to make sense. Well, this is an internal of build. Build is expecting some fixed location arguments here, and then this probably could be out of order with other arguments to follow. To support that out of orderness capability, Python supports keyword parameters, so that belongs to build. When you invoke the build method of the Google API discovery package, you need to feed it a credentials object or other things. There's things that would take the place of credentials. We're going to feed it credentials. And when we feed it the credentials object, we're feeding it the one we created up here. That would be an argument for using a different word here. But especially with OO, kind of a purity that kind of develops in your mind using OO that you see in the Ruby language all the time. you don't want arbitrary decisions littering things up. So that's why you see argument name equals the same word as the argument so often in Python. So we're going to run it. It creates our GSC service. It's sitting there. What can you do with it? Well, you can say that it is equal to, well, you can say arbitrary variable name is equal to calling sub, methods on it. In this case, getting a list of sites. Now I could just show that object directly and it would be kind of ugly, or I could use this nice little list comprehension to just show them, cleanly parsing it out. Now this none, 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 none is because this weird trick. See, my print statements are responsible for these 4 lines, but this 5th line is because it's the last thing on your interactive console, and they're simulating Jupyter's behavior by not requiring the print statement. So it's like another implied print out there. And in Jupyter, that semicolon will silence this line, but not in the current Python interactive shell. So that's it. These are some sites I run or have run over the years, and I'm connected to Google Search Console. The same thing applies to Google Analytics I could do, but instead of showing you an analytics example, I'll just show you the same example here in Jupyter. And so the first step is, if I tried to use it, if I tried to import OAuth, probably the same as anyone out there who tried, you would get this, not installed. So what you do is you pip install OAuth. And this used to be, you used to have to put an exclamation at the beginning. You used to have to use this long syntax to make sure it was using the right pip belonging to the system here. Cannot, well, yeah, that's fine. There's a lot of requirements. The API stuff happens here again, so it's there. So if I were to go back to the import, see, it imports, right? There you go. And if you didn't already have some of this other Google supporting libraries, they are installed now as part of the requirements. And we can say credentials equals OAuth.Credentials.get. Okay, same process. You get it again because this is a different Python exe. This is a different Python interpreter. This time, well, it's coming up as a tab in my existing browser just because of the way I ran it. But you don't need it anymore after you've copied that token. And so, yeah, it's a credentials object, just like over in the terminal. And using that, you can do these examples, which I'll just copy in one chunk now. Well, no, it will be 2 chunks. Again, the reminder, this is in common to any Google service you connect to. And then this other code changes based on which Google service you actually are connecting to. I showed you the Google Search Console. In the last example, I'll show you Google Analytics. It's only version 3 because I'm using some services that are not available yet under 4. You kind of have to bop back and forth between versions 3 and 4 of the analytics stuff. But, I have a couple of sites, that I've used over the years. And I'll probably bring this one back alive. This is the one that has been alive. And Linux and Pipulate, I haven't even activated Google Analytics on. I've just so to the side as I do my day job that I, haven't bothered. And for the most part, these are abandoned sites too. So I'll start bringing them alive again. I'm making my move with the whole, being a presence online. And the thing to take away from this here is that the next step after that last stuff we did is to actually hit data sources. Now I can hit and empty out all the data from my Search Console, for example, and then check what's already been collected, check what new days are available, and just keep filling it up so that I always have a history, even as that whatever it is, 16, 18-month window that Google Search Console keeps to delete stuff, eating its tail. You can have data even longer than that if you want to, but that's not really the main point. The main point is to get that data local into first fast capture. You remember that whole reason for that NoSQL at the beginning is to do fast capture of your data. Hit an API, save, hit an API, save. And then we do transforms that puts it into more usable Excel or SQL type tabular data, where you can use Python pandas on. Another very, very powerful approach. So, just follow my videos from the beginning. You can see this is where I started thinking about this video series, and I had bought a new machine, and I'm settling into that new machine that starts here. And I keep going on about this stuff, and it brings us up to like NBDev is there, HTTPX. Persistent dictionary is a really important one. How to use the real SQL that's lurking behind that, and how to make command lines, command line tools in Jupyter. And then finally here, I'm uploading some packages to the Python packaging index, because everything up to this has been very simple, very much as part of the Python standard library, or so mainstream now it might as well be part of the standard library. And then we get to OAuth. I got a long history with OAuth. Oh, have I got stories? I'll start telling you some of my tech stories. Nothing really bad. It's like, that's the reason I'm like, no drama, backroom SEO tech. With some very advanced techniques in my back pocket. Tricks. Everything in tech is a trick, right? Here's me taking my finger off. There's 1 million views right there. That's the kind of stuff I do. Check it out. I'm not lying to you. And this is all tricks too. And the latest trick is connecting to Google services. If you were to go to my page, you'll see I give the link to how Google shows how to do this, quite to hit home quite how significant this video is. So Google says when you're ready to connect to Google and do some services, use this easy and oh my god, okay, so HTTP lib2 deprecated much, putting your client ID and secret in your code when their developer console and cloud console sites give you .json files, which have a lot of this in those JSON files, and then dealing with the mechanics of creating, the connections and putting your scopes and stuff, right? This is just so much to expose to the user just to do these simple things. Now compare that to the code I'm telling you to do. You pip install this and then you can import it. You do that one line and you got a credentials object. You create, or you import the build function, and then you can build any Google service object you want. GSC service, GA service, names are arbitrary. And then you got to learn about the respective APIs. I admit I picked some of the simplest API things you can do. List all sites under Search Console. List all accounts, which is at the top of a hierarchy. I'm not even dealing with any of the nestedness of, accounts, properties, profiles, and views. So these are about the most simple, queries you can do. But you can go into the code. If you git clone this, you can make any request you want of any service you connect to. This line is just a fancy list comprehension way of showing you an otherwise very messy object to look at in memory. So we're sitting on top of GA service. If I were to just show you that, it's, it's GA accounts. If I were to just show you that, it's a big JSON object and ugly to look at. You can get the idea. But list comprehension makes it a lot easier to look at. Oh, didn't get the semicolon. Watch us suppress the none. See? And I give it back in tuples because, when you got domain names in Google Analytics, you don't really know which site it is, because Google Analytics can be sliced and diced in any way. So I show tuple pairs with the account ID next to it. And there you have it. This sets the stage so that we can connect to many various data sources and start populating our NoSQL databases and start doing transforms. You can almost think of it as a pivot or a, it's good to think of it as a data transform as a pivot. I'm spinning through a series of JSON and arrays of JSON objects and sort of turning it into a row and column tabular data object using mostly the built-in Python abilities. On occasion, pandas, not always necessary, surprisingly. And then dropping that result into a true SQL database. You could store CSVs out of pandas. A lot of people do that. But I think I've seen the light now. I'm really inclined towards using SQL now for long-term persistent data storage. What I tried to do there was Control-Shift-R, clear all cells, and show you sort of the latest of where we're at. This is going to be built into the scaffolding now. The ability to, not of course these particular queries, although keeping GA and GSC sample queries around, not a particularly bad idea, but let's merge these guys, right? We don't need that displaying of values. And this right here, we need the API client import. That line I keep saying isn't common to everyone. And there we go. This is the essential of what Google tries to show you spread out over all this. It just has so much nuance and so many tripping up points that I think it turns most people away. I've reduced it to this. Congratulations. Happy Google service connecting, and I'll see you again soon as we connect to and really pull down some significant data, like maybe I'll do a redirect mapping or something of migrating a site. I don't know. Talk to you soon, and don't forget to subscribe.